name is Shantay Robinson. I'm the Education Programs Manager at MCM. For total transparency, Skyler Henry is my nephew. Just wanted to let you know that. We're gonna talk to him. We're gonna ask him some questions, and then I'm gonna open it up for questions from the audience in the end. But first, I'd like to read his bio. Journalist Skyler Henry has been named a Washington, D.C. based correspondent for CBS NewsPath. Henry has covered a variety of stories, including the 2020 race for the White House, as well as U.S. politics from the front lines at CBS NewsPath, CBS News 24/7 news gathering service for CBS stations and broadcasters around the world. Henry joined CBS News after 3 years as a weekend anchor and reporter for WMAR TV in Baltimore. There he was a co-anchor of the station's 6 o'clock p.m. to 11 p.m. newscasts on Sundays. A skilled writer, reporter, videographer, and editor, he was recently promoted to the station's investigative unit, focusing on long-form stories around cold case files. Before WAMR TV, Henry spent 3.5 years as an evening news anchor, managing editor, and reporter for WMGT TV in Macon, Georgia. Henry anchored the station's 6 p.m. evening news and assisted with the production of each night's newscast. Earlier, he was a production assistant and stage manager at WSB TV, Atlanta, Georgia. Henry was raised in Stone Mountain, Georgia. He earned a bachelor's degree in multimedia communications from Georgia Southern University. He is a member of the National Association of Black Journalists and the National Press Photography Association. And I have a little video of Skyler in action that I'm going to show you.
So right now, CBS News' Skyler Henry is joining us. He's got the tough assignment in Tampa Bay. Hey, Skyler.
I know. I know. It's such hard work. You know what, though? I want to add into that trivia question. You know, Tampa actually hosted 5 of these Super Bowls, so just a little sprinkled on top of that answer there.
We love sprinkles. Okay, first things first. Remind everyone about the precautions for people who are going to get to watch the game inside the stadium.
You got it. So we know that there are going to be about 7,500 vaccinated healthcare workers who will be in attendance, but those fans who will be there, it'll be about a third of the way filled here at Raymond James Stadium. They will be required to wear masks. They will also be sitting in what's referred to as pods with those who will also be ticketed with them. There will be open seating in front, behind, and to the right and left, about 3 seats separating them from the next group. And there will be everything done electronically, and that's everything from ticketing to concessions and signage all around the stadium, reminding people to adhere to these COVID safety protocols just to keep everyone as safe as possible.
All right, what can you tell us, Skyler, about the halftime show? Any surprises, any special guests besides the weekend?
Yeah. Well, you know, the weekend, he had a press conference yesterday, and he said that he's actually going to go it alone. You know, traditionally in the Super Bowls, we would see a surprise guest or two pop up. You know, we've seen Beyonce bring people out in the past, but the weekend is going to do it by himself, partially because of the pandemic, wanting to keep folks in terms of the crews that are setting up the stages and everything else as safe as possible, and also not to risk anyone else's health. We also know that he is actually going to include the stadium, and the stage is going to be built into the stadium, but he won't be like crowd surfing or anything else like that. Again, because of the pandemic, he kept a tight lip about what he will actually do, but you know it's the weekend, so he's going to put on a great performance.
So that was just a little bit of an example of what Skyler Henry does. Okay, so I'll get into these questions. Yes, Karen? Yes?
That was applause.
Okay, thank you. Oh, great. So, see, I'm gonna ask some questions that I really want to know the answers to. So my first question is, what made you want to be a journalist? Was it always a dream?
Oh, that's a good question. First off, I didn't even realize, I forgot all about that, because like that was like a treat to be able to go to Tampa for the Super Bowl. I think, Shantay, as you well know, it was always like I always did things to entertain folks, whether it was like dancing or anything else like that. And so the limelight I was always attracted to. But to be honest with you, in high school and college, at least initially, I wanted to be an architect. In high school, I was a part of all these technical associations and engineering things like that because I thought that that's what it was going to be. Until I took like a calculus class in college, and I was like, oh yeah, this isn't for me. And so I went to change my major. I knew that I had done some things with the morning announcements in high school, and these are years ago, but I knew I'd done some things then. But I said I wanted to give it a shot because Ryan Seacrest graduated from the high school that I did, and he was big into our multimedia in high school. So I said, all right, well, let me give it a shot. And so I did, but the path that I originally chose was radio. And so I did a lot of things with different radio stations, moved out to Los Angeles, and interned for ironically interned for Ryan Seacrest and a few others out in Los Angeles before I moved back to Atlanta, not really knowing what I was going to do next. Thankfully, with some college connections, I was able to get into a newsroom in Atlanta, WSB TV, as Shantay mentioned. And that kind of opened my eyes to the world a little bit, right? To see how the news was put on television every single day. And, you know, the TV station that I worked at, WSB TV, was like the TV station in the city. So, I mean, learning from the best, shadowing the best, until I was able to kind of put some things together on my own. And then that is what prompted me then to move down to Macon.
Oh, yeah, I kind of knew that, but interesting. Interesting. I really didn't know that you were so serious about architecture. So I remember the conversation.
It was really real. Like, I was hell bent on it, so much so that I thought that I was only going to do 1 year at Georgia Southern and then transfer to one of the architecture programs at like University of Georgia or Georgia Tech or something like that. But I that calculus class, man, that was like, oh yeah, nah, this isn't for you.
Can you tell us what a day in the life of a journalist is like for you?
Well, it's changed tremendously. On one end, COVID has certainly changed how we do things. But then on the other hand, too, things have changed tremendously from a local news setting to a national news setting. So, I joined CBS in 2019, and, whereas the newsroom, in a local setting is, a city, maybe a neighboring state if something is pertinent enough. But here, the world is basically where you have to put your focus, and they can send you anywhere. I've been everywhere from Iowa to Florida, as you saw, to New Hampshire, New Orleans, Mississippi, Alabama, covering all sorts of different things. And you really don't really know what a day is going to bring you or where it's going to send you, literally. And so typically the days start really early, maybe 7 o'clock in the morning. We'll do some emails with our senior team and talk about potential stories that we'd want to cover for the day. For example, today I have been on the infrastructure beat. The president is going to be signing that bipartisan infrastructure bill into law on Monday. And so we were on Capitol Hill today talking about what's next. And we know that the spending plan, the social spending plan, is next up for Congress. And that certainly is a big talker with a lot of Democratic pushback, ironically, on certain parts of the bill. And so we were doing a bit of that today. And the day sort of just goes along. There are live shots from people from different stations all over the country. So I'll do a live shot with our friends down in Miami at 1 hour, and then do something with, like, for example, I was on in Los Angeles about 2 hours ago. So, it really is, it's cool because, everyone sees you, but it's also a little like, oh, I got to get this right because everyone sees you. But you know, in the last couple of hours, we just got a bit of breaking news in that one of President Trump's former aides, Steve Bannon, was indicted by the DOJ, and so I actually I'm still on the clock technically, but I mean that's just kind of how the day goes, right? It's nonstop. It's a you know constant. I mean, you could at first I felt guilty about taking days off, but one thing I realized is that the news is going to keep going whether I'm paying attention to it or not. And that's just kind of what it is. And so you just kind of have to strap on and hold on tight and hope you're able to tell a good story.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of the upsides to being a journalist? What you said you get it to be in the limelight and you get to talk to people and people get to see you. What else is there so that's so wonderful about being a journalist for you?
Well, you know, it's funny, limelight is the byproduct. You know, I think for me, I'm always appreciative that people are watching because they could easily be doing anything else, whether that's watching another TV station or literally doing anything else with their lives. And so I think the biggest perk to me is access, right? It's a treat to be able to go up on Capitol Hill or to go to the White House or to be able to go to the Super Bowl, as you saw, you know, like those types of things, you know, you wouldn't necessarily be able to do with, you know, any other job. And, you know, it's an incredible privilege to be able to be on the front lines. For example, last year, in the aftermath of George Floyd, I mean, we were up in Minneapolis the day after, maybe 2 days after the video was, you know, widely seen around, and, you know, between protests and the police being arrested and all those things like that, from Derek Chauvin on. I mean, we were there for that. And it's funny, I was talking to somebody, I was doing a 40 under 40 presentation a few months ago. And someone asked me what that felt like. And I was like, oh, well, you know, it's kind of like Forrest Gump in a way, right? Where, you know, if you remember the movie, how he was just in every single like historical event. And like, he told his story on a park bench and it was like, really? Could this really have happened? And like, no, this really happens for me. Like, where you look around and you're like, some of the biggest things that happen in the world, insurrection, my house is 3 blocks from the Capitol. So like, I mean, I was here. And you know, it really is a surreal feeling.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got to CBS? Like, we know that what was the journey like from high school to college to CBS? What was that trajectory like?
Sure. Well, it was one where I wrote down on a vision board long ago, probably when I was 19 or 20, that I wanted to be at network news by the time I was 30 years old. And I kind of, you know, left it on the back burner for a while. I didn't really kind of go back to it, but I just sort of wanted to find my way. And as I was saying, you know, bouncing around from LA to California LA to Georgia to Maryland, and then now here in DC, it was interesting because so many different things happened, right? And the joy of this job, I would say, is you kind of evolve with it in a lot of ways, right? Where at first I just wanted to be a reporter until somebody told me that, hey, you should probably give the anchoring thing a try. Then I started to anchor and I did it for quite a long time. And I was like, you know what? I like this too. And you know, certain things sort of happened, right? You know, the whole luck, preparation, opportunity thing. When I left Macon, I went to a conference, the National Association of Black Journalists Conference in DC. I knew that I wanted to be in the DMV. I wanted to give it a shot, and you know, things just sort of moved out of the way. I kind of manifested it in a wonky way, and it sort of, you know, worked out for me. And then the network thing, it sort of came about in the 11th hour, because I was really hell-bent, honestly, on trying to get back to Atlanta to work. And like I again, forgetting that this was on the, the back burner, that I had network news by the time I was 30. I just wanted to be able to be working. And the one thing that I've, still yet to do is to be a professional in my hometown. Like that is the one thing that's in terms of like checklist, like that's the one that I want. And this sort of opened up. They asked if I had an interest in politics. I dabbled in it, but I wasn't like a policy wonk or anything like that. And I jumped into it, and little did I know my first 2 weeks would be like impeachment trial for the president, the first one. But I mean, there was no better teacher than to be able to jump in during such a pivotal moment like that. And shortly thereafter, obviously the presidential election, into COVID, into George Floyd, into so many other things. And I mean, it's funny, my 2-year anniversary was yesterday. And like you look up and you're just like, oh my gosh, like so much has been covered in such a short amount of time. I can't believe it. So
Yeah.
I'm just riding the wave.
So what's the most challenging thing you think about your profession?
I remember when I was in local news, I think for sure, covering like violence was tough. You never want to see somebody at their worst, whether it's losing a loved one, or, their house goes up in smoke, or frustrated at government officials because something's not, their house is flooded, and they their insurance told them one thing, and the Department of Public Works told them another, and now they're frustrated. I think that was always hard. At this level, politics is, in terms of like a logistical difficulty, politics is the funny thing, because you kind of have to learn the game, how they negotiate, what people say, why they do it, when they do it. I certainly think dealing with the last administration was much different than this one, and not even in like a Democrat or Republican sort of way, but just kind of dealing with an administration that didn't really like the media too much, and so we sort of had to deal with being called fake news, or being attacked when we were in the field because people didn't respect us. So I mean, like that, I think has certainly brought a new set of challenges. And I mean, even still, I mean, we are probably a more divided nation than ever. And so when you're out and about, you kind of still have to keep your head on a swivel, because you never really know what's up, especially when you go to cover politically based stories.
So what can you say prepared you for this life? I mean, it's a lot. Like you have to deal with people not respecting you in this environment. You have to be ready to go cover a news story at the drop of a hat, wherever that is. You have to be a public figure. Like, what in your life has prepared you for this moment?
You know the answer to that. We came from a no. I would honestly say that the big root of all of this is a good family base, right? And just having good support, whether it's my mom, Shantay's sister, or you guys, cheering me on when things get a little tough. Like that sort of stuff always helps. I think as you grow in this business, you sort of adapt to the challenges, or you don't and you quit. But you adapt to it, and you look for ways to try to just survive. And I don't even mean that obviously literally, but you're trying to just keep your head above water in a lot of ways. And after a while, you realize, oh, okay, well, I'm good. I'm okay. And then you build on that. And I think that certainly helps. And so, obviously, believing in yourself and having good mentors, I would also say has helped me a lot, just sort of navigate the spaces that I've been in on all accounts, like from when I was doing radio stuff to this now. I mean, it all helped.
Okay, so I want to switch gears a little bit, like,
Yeah.
and talk about journalism itself. So what helps you, when do you know you have a good story?
To me, a good story does one of three things. It teaches you something, you are exposed to, or it makes you feel something. And last is it makes you want to do something.
Mhm.
And so I'll break those down. So teaching you something, all right. Say you don't know what's going to be in this infrastructure bill that's getting ready to be signed, and you're wondering how that is going to impact Karen Allen, right? How that is going to, you know, is it going to mess with my check? Does that mean I'm going to have to pay more in taxes? Does that mean that my street is going to be fixed a lot quicker? You know, those types of things. That is what I meant by that. I think it makes you feel something. As I mentioned before about, you know, having to tell stories about people in their lowest moments, um, no one wants to see somebody who they could easily be in their shoes go through something terrible, right? Whether you are a mom who has young boys and, you know, someone loses their life to, you know, gun violence, or, you know, whether you are, you know, somebody who lives in the suburbs, who lives in a house just like the one you saw catch fire, but you just so happen to remember to turn off your stove. That sort of stuff, I think, is a good story. And then the other thing that makes you want to do something, take you back to the George Floyd thing. I mean, obviously seeing the coverage surrounding that, think about how many protests and demonstrations we saw nationwide and really around the world calling for some sort of action and really a new conversation around how police do their job, because of what they saw, you know, on that social media post with George Floyd and Derek Chauvin. And so I think those are the three sort of bases to kind of stand out in terms of being a good story.
Okay. Interesting. So at MCM, we educate our community on media production. What are some of the most important considerations you make when producing news contents?
On the most like literal level, and putting stories together, no one likes to see straight up interviews all or throughout the whole story. So I think visually appealing pieces always, you know, work, and that actually goes to the, you know, what makes a good story. And it doesn't have to be, you know, some sort of grandiose, you know, we've got drone shots, we've got, you know, all sorts of like musical instruments or anything else like that playing, or anything like that. But if something is extremely visual, whether it's I don't know, going to a festival, and you are seeing the, you know, lights, camera, action of it all, and you are able to capture that on video and, you know, audibly, I think that, you know, could be, you know, really good. If you're doing like a one-on-one, say for example, yesterday I did a story with a 93-year-old World War II veteran who enlisted when he was 15 years old. And the paperwork was a little funny. So he was able to kind of convince the recruiters that he was 18. And he was able to hop in, do his thing, and he saw it all. He saw the concentration camps in Europe. He had PTSD, unfortunately, because of that, but he still saw fit to continue to serve, and he served in the following wars thereafter. That was a story that we had visuals for because we kind of walked with him. He showed us some old pictures of him back in the day. He was able to kind of show us some of his military decoration and that sort of stuff. So I think you just kind of have to keep your eyes open for those sorts of things. And those are the types of things, to me, that really make a story stand out.
So what's some advice that you can give someone who wants to venture into a career as a journalist? What are some things to be aware of?
I would always say, what I used to tell like students or even some of my mentees is to keep that curiosity. Um, uh, Journalism it's a profession, but really your interests should drive your journalism, right? Whether that's community involvement, entertainment, sports, uh, politics, justice, all those sorts of things should fuel what you really want. Journalism is just the medium, or whatever medium you choose within the industry, to tell your interests through, right? If you're interested in wrestling, and you will want to start a podcast, you got it. I mean, that should be the motivation enough to do it. I think if you want to learn how to do this, certainly, take a journalism course or even minor in it, major in it, or something like that. But don't let that be the sole thing that you do. Find something else it could be cooking, right? The Food Network exists for a reason, right? To learn how to tell a good story. And those sorts of things, I think, really sort of fuel how you're able to do this. And then the other part of that, I think, is all journalists, those who've done it for 5 years, those who've done it for 20, have some level of perseverance. And I think it can be taught, but if you have it already instilled in yourself, I think that's going to kind of put you leaps and bounds ahead of a lot of people in the field, because the industry is tough. It gets tough. Not to mention that, like, all the life stuff that happens along the way, right, outside of work, that sort of play a part into it. And so, like, I think being able to kind of have that tunnel vision, if you will, to be able to say, okay, this is what I want, let me go get it, and persevere through it all, I think, are the two biggest things that I would say to anybody looking to do it.
So, like, perseverance and determination are definitely.
Perseverance, determination, and then letting your interests fuel your journalism.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, because people, there's so many avenues that people can take these days with, hundreds of channels and, interests in cooking and in sports, and there's like 24 hours of programming that needs to be filled with, people who are interested in these things. So that's a great point you just made. So what are some aspects of news reporting that the public might not be aware of, but that you think are important for them to know?
Aspects of news reporting that I think the public should be aware of. One, we are human.
Yes.
We exist outside of the box that you may see us in. So that means that we don't necessarily need to see all of your messages letting us know that we're taller than we thought you are, or we don't appreciate the outfit that you're wearing, or anything else like that. I think a lot of my women colleagues certainly suffer from that a little bit more, in terms of dealing with, just the boldest of viewers. I think people would be surprised at how unluxurious it is. A lot of times people think that it is very glitz and glamour when you work with TV, but when you're working in those small TV markets, you're making pennies, $19,000-$20,000 trying to get by, wondering if you can, skate by with some food stamps, or should you, survive off of boxes of ramen and figure it out. And that, to the perseverance point, is part of what I was saying before. There's not, well, now there is, but before, there's not people that are like there doing your makeup. There's not somebody that's picking out your clothes. There isn't some, group that tells you this is what you need to do, this is how you should do it. Like, no, like, there's a lot of stuff that you kind of have to figure out on your own. And I don't think people really recognize that, because they see the finished product on television, that, journalists have to, if they're telling, let's see, you guys are in Montgomery County. So, all right, say they're telling a story in Annapolis and they are, running and gunning, but they have to get back to Montgomery County to tell the story. That's like a 45-minute, if not longer, drive to get out to all the way to the other side of the state. And so you're running all the way out there. You're trying to gather the story. If you're an MMJ, which means multimedia journalist, you've got to gather the content yourself, do the interviews, shoot the video, find a way to edit and write, and then go all the way back to Montgomery County to be able to tell that story for, say, a live shot. And so it's a day's work for a minute, 30 seconds, 2 minutes of a finished piece. And you don't realize that because everybody looks all calm, cool, collected, and beautiful. But it really took a lot of work to be able to get that type of stuff done. So I think that, and, patience is and understanding, which is something generally, I think that this, us in 2021 don't really grant ourselves a lot. Understand that people make mistakes, and people don't always get it right. But I think now we as a society have been trained to be so binary in a lot of ways, into either you're right or you're wrong, and you can't do anything to fix it. And everything in life is so much more nuanced than that. And I think that is probably one of the bigger things, especially as you kind of get into politics and things like that. Just hey, listen, it'll all work itself out. Don't be so quick to, attack so quickly, because, we're all just trying to figure it out.
That's some good life advice, especially for me, because I'm like, I'm either right or wrong. And I'm not very,
That's how it goes.
So that's good to hear. So we work with students from 11 to 17 in our Youth Media Academy. How do you think that they could start if they, and basically they have an interest in media making? So what is some advice that you would give to them, especially as young people, to, I mean, you did give us drop some jewels in this interview so far, but specifically speaking to young people, what would you say to them?
Follow that interest, as I was saying before, right? Whether it's sports, music, business, whatever you're interested in, follow it. I mean, as they are creating content, they're probably more savvy with the socials than any of us are. I see some of the best content on like a TikTok, right? Like, are you storyboarding? Like, I don't even understand like how you guys put this stuff together. And, I think fueling that even more, right? Just kind of leaving things open for kids or young people to sort of like figure out, right? Like, just give like a subject of, hey, listen, we want to see, what a typical weekend looks like for you. And that could be anything from playing video games to going out, hanging at the mall. Are you a sneakerhead? Let me know. Let's talk about sneakers for, 2 minutes and tell me, like, show me the coolest ones you have. Like, there's so many different things that you can pull from. I think coming up, even when I was learning how to do this, it was so regimented, right? Like, you had to be able to kind of stay in between the guardrails of content. And I think now more than ever, you're able to see really how far people can take this, from a TikTok video to a documentary that wins, tons of awards. And I think finding things that you're interested in certainly help. Telling stories that you haven't seen before certainly help. And profiling parts of society that many people don't necessarily know about help, right? Like, there's so much that we don't know about one another, which is so interesting. But I think about what's the popular thing now? Squid Game on Netflix. You know, they talked about how the director had been trying to get that series made for years, and only now is it gaining some steam. But I mean, look at how, you know, just off the wall that show is, and it shows us a whole different part of the world that we would have never even thought about before. And so I think that step one, if you were talking to somebody between the ages of 11 and 17 and they didn't know where to start, well, who are you? Who tell me about yourself, right? What are you interested in? Where is your background from? Where is your family from? What, you know, are you interested in sports, music, you know, anything, clothes, right? And then go from there. And I think that you'll be surprised at how much you'll be able to create with just looking at yourself.
Good. That's very good. Very good. Okay, this is my last question. So being a journalist, you have to be very autonomous. You have to be self-motivated. Where do you find your motivation?
Where do I find my motivation? Good books, I think. And to be honest with you, looking at other people thriving in it. You know, I'm inspired by people who are able to express themselves in a way that is authentic to them, and people respond well to it. I'm also attracted to excellence. And so seeing people do things well, whether it's, you know, LeBron James or Tom Brady or, you know, Will Smith or anything like that, like seeing people be able to really excel at being their authentic selves in what they do professionally is a treat. And I think that to me is, you know, inspiration in and of itself. Now, journalistically speaking, like specifically, I'm always inspired by a good story, whether it be print or on television. How people are able to find unique characters is always something that I'm attracted to. And I think being able to, again, hit one of those pillars that I talked about in terms of telling a good story, I think is always inspiration and the motivation that I think all of us should really sort, or at least for myself, that I use to kind of keep me going.
Thank you, Shantay, and thank you, Skyler, so much for sharing your journey. I was a producer at C-SPAN many years ago. That was my earlier career. Before that, I was a broadcaster of Voice of America. And way before that, I was a print reporter back in my home country, China. I followed my father's footsteps. But moving forward, I happen to serve on the board of MCM, so I'm a big fan. And I'm also taking this course, this training on podcasting. That's, you know, something I would love to do more with, and learning, you know, skills and tools and what have you. But as a person of color, a minority person myself, and I'm looking at you and to see your career trajectory. As a person of color, a minority person myself, and I keep hearing echoes. Do you guys hear that?
I was gonna say, let me mute.
Oh, okay. And so as a person of color, as a minority person, especially as you worked your way up to the networks, did you find that you had to work twice as hard or 3 times as hard to get to where you are and stay where you are? Because you know, it's hard to get to a place, but it's even harder to stay at a place, if you will. So I would like to see how you, you know, your thoughts on that.
That's such a good question. I remember when I was in Los Angeles, and I actually mentioned this during a commencement speech. That's such a good question. I remember when I was in what happened was I was having a conversation with the higher up about how I can find ways to excel in radio, right? And I remember one of the guys told me, no one wants to hear a Black guy who sounds white. And I didn't really know, like, I was like, what? I got like, what does that even mean? And I took it to heart, and I was very upset about it, and it hurt because I was like, this is who I am. Like, I'm not a Black guy trying to sound white. I'm just me, right? And unfortunately, I think a lot more corporate folks feel that way. And so the challenge for myself was just, all right, well, if this is going to be what it is, then let me just sort of try to find who my authentic self is. Clearly, I'm a Black man, right? And just be the best version of myself in every room that I walk in every state, in every city, every newsroom that is. And there have always sort of been microaggressions at every level, right? There's a reason that, you know, you get asked to cover the Black History Month story, even though you didn't pitch anything. They're just like, oh, we want the Black guy to tell the Black story. And so those sorts of things come from time to time. But in terms of the latter part of your question, in terms of saying, oh, well, how do you stay there? I think that's an interesting point, because now more than ever, I would say there are probably more ears in the room who are listening to perspectives. Whereas before, I think it sort of trendy, right? Where it was like, oh, it's a something celebration month, and so let's tell the story about this, or let's look at the aftermath of the stuff with George Floyd, how there was this big push on getting more Black voices and stories out there, or even this year with the aftermath, or not even aftermath, but just how things have gone within the Asian community with Stop Asian Hate. I think that there's so much that people are paying attention to now. So now more than ever, I think there are a lot of voices that should be heard from. And Dottie, yours is one of them. And I think that is sort of kind of how I'm getting by now, right? Like, people are listening to the things that I have to say, and they're appreciative of my perspective. And I think that to me is a step in the right direction.
A lot of Asian American journalists have become the story in light of the anti-Asian hate for the past year or so. And they didn't want to cover the story, but guess what? They were folded into the stories themselves. And in a way, they decided, well, if we don't tell the story, who's going to tell the story for us? We're the if you will, to tell the stories. And so I'm still part of AAJA, Asian American Journalists Association.
Yeah.
I'm no longer a working journalist, but I'm very much plugged in. And, my husband is still a journalist, and I stay connected with my journalistic friends. And in many ways, whether it's George Floyd incident, the Asian American